Welcome to SEN Insights, powered by Rubric, the podcast focused on what's shaping the post-secondary student experience sector right now. I'm Paul Clayton, CEO of SEN. In each episode, we explore the key issues, ideas, and successes across the sector, from leadership and funding to wellbeing, data, and impact. Through conversations with sector leaders and practitioners, SEN Insights shares practical insights you can apply to your own organisation to strengthen student experience and outcomes. So let's get into today's conversation. Welcome back to another episode of SEN Insights, powered by Rubric. Now, if you've been following the ripples of the Australian Universities Accord, you'll know that one of the biggest shifts in our sector recently was the birth of the National Student Ombudsman. It was designed to be a bit of a North Star for student safety and fairness, but as we all know, the tertiary world, moving from a policy paper to a fully functional office is no small feat. Today, we're checking the pulse of that progress. I'm joined by Sarah Bendall from the NSO to look back at their first 15 months in operation, and we're going to dive into the lessons they've learned from the front lines of student complaints, how their trauma-informed approach is actually working in practice, and what the smoke signals are telling them about the current state of campus culture. So let's get started. Welcome to SEN Insights. Right, well, welcome, Sarah. Do you want to introduce yourself to our listeners, and then I'll jump straight into some of the questions?
Yes, thank you so much, Paul, for having me on your fantastic podcast. My name is Sarah Bendall. I'm the first Assistant Ombudsman with the National Student Ombudsman, NSO.
Brilliant. And for those, just to top this off, for those who don't know, what is a National Student Ombudsman?
It's a very good question. It's such a mouthful. An ombudsman pops up in different sectors, and there is now one for the higher education sector. It's essentially an independent referee for disputes between, in our case, students and higher education providers. Plays a really important role in rectifying power imbalances when something might be going wrong. So it has a role to play in individual dispute resolution, but also in shining a light across the sector for things that might need to improve with respect to the student experience. That's the key focus for the NSO.
Fabulous, fabulous. We've come to the right place. This is what we're all about, student experience. Okay, so let's jump in. So first off, just the looking back phase. The new car smell, now that the NSO has been on the road for, 15 months now?
Yes, yep.
Yeah, it's a fair amount of time. What's been the most surprising thing you've discovered about the Australian student experience that didn't necessarily show up in the initial Accord reports?
Well, 15 months is both a long period of time and a short period of time.
I agree.
And yes, the new car, I love a new car. I feel like it should be electric at the moment. That's for the best.
Mine comes next week.
Your electric car?
Yeah.
Lucky you.
Yeah.
I haven't made the shift yet. This is probably too much information for podcast listeners.
No, it's good. I like to keep this honest and real.
Yes, well, honest and real, I have a 17-year-old Volkswagen Golf that
Lovely
I can't bring myself to let go of. And it still works, so that's lucky. But beyond that, focusing on NSO over the first 15 months, things that have surprised me that weren't necessarily apparent. I think one big one is, and I should have known this because it probably is apparent from the documents, but the average student in 2026 is very diverse. You know, the student offering and the types of students that we have in the higher education sector are really varied. You know, you've got school leavers who people talk about a lot. You've got a huge chunk of career changes as well. The first in families, you've got a whole lot of international students and, of course, domestic students. You've got people that are studying full-time online. You've got people that are studying hybrid. You've got people that are full-time on campus. You've got people studying in remote regional hubs. It's really diverse. And I think that what really surprised me was that the actual service offering hasn't changed that much, while the student cohort has changed a lot. And so what that means for me in the NSO is that it speaks to the tension point that we see. So 1.6 million students, lots of different needs, but a system that hasn't changed a lot. and can't offer all those students the full service that they need. And that's where I think we come in. But I'll tell you one other one, just
Go
because
on.
I think this is really surprising, but also positive. The Quilt survey, so the
Yes.
quality indicators for teaching and learning survey for the sector, I didn't know about before I started in the sector.
Oh, okay.
The one stat that really stood out for me was peer engagement. So as an indicator of student experience, that's the one that's held out. And it was really low by comparison to the others. It's still quite low. It sits at about 60%, while the
Yeah.
others, other indicators are about 80. And I wondered why that was. You know, it took a dip in COVID, of course,
Yeah.
because there wasn't as much engagement. It went from I think 50s down to 40s, but it's on a trend upwards again, which I think is a really great thing for the
That can only
sector.
be healthy, can't it? Definitely.
Yeah, I mean, it still sits about 20% below the other indicators, but it shows that the sector is really focused on peer engagement. And I think
Yep.
peer engagement, obviously, for your listeners and everything that SEN does, but also for the NSO, is absolutely critical because,
Yes.
you know, that connection and belonging comes from that peer engagement. Um, so that's positive in that it's trending upwards, but I was
It's
surprised to
good.
see that.
Yeah, no, it's good. It's funny you mentioned it. It's one of the things that we find in our space quite frustrating is things like Quilt and even the student experience survey don't really measure student experience. It's more
Mm,
around teaching and learning, like you said, or
yeah,
student services. So that's
yeah.
something we're looking longer term to address. But yeah, great points. Um, so moving on then, your first 100 days versus now, what did you see in that initial burst? And how has that changed to what you're seeing come through as more regular complaints that you're seeing now?
Yeah, it's the types of complaints have remained amazingly consistent from day
Oh,
one
okay.
until now. So the breakdown of the types, which for listeners is almost half of the matters through the door are about course administration and fees and refunds. So back of
Right.
house things that aren't
Yep.
going as student expect them to go. Um, two main areas within that are confusion and sense of unfairness about the application of special consideration, and also
Right.
recognition of prior learning is another one that
Oh,
features
that's a
quite
big problem, isn't
prominently.
it?
That's a big one.
Yeah.
So these have remained consistent from day one, around
Oh,
47% of matters through the door. Um, Second most common is quality of teaching and learning.
yep.
Placements features prominently, issues with placements, all sorts of different issues with
Yep.
placements. And the third category is complaints about processes around um, academic exclusion and also misconduct.
Yeah.
So that they've been consistent from day one. Those three categories have been the most prominent.
Can I didn't pre-warn you of this one, but it jumped out of me from what we were discussing then. One of the words that came up in a discussion I was having with some colleagues earlier this week was students as customers. Now,
Yes.
universities shy away from that, obviously,
Yeah.
because they want to that original place was about teaching and learning and culture, but actually
Mm.
they're all paying. So in many
Yes.
regards, they're customers, and like you say, many of the complaints to you are about refunds or about administration
Yes.
of their course. How do you, from your perspective, do you see them as customers? Is that part of your remit? And how does that jar with how universities see them, or are you seeing more of a shift towards that approach?
I have been waiting for someone to ask me this question. Um, I so when I first started, I assumed, and I could have probably used this one for my answer to question one as well. I assumed that the higher education sector wouldn't have an issue with seeing students as customers because it is a consumer. It's a consumer product. It's a service
Yeah.
that the sector's providing. Um, and I've worked in other sectors where, it's sort of the fully embraced, the idea of a customer is fully embraced. And
Yeah.
that helps with conceiving of things like customer-centered design and really
Yes.
nudging that forward. So the sense that that is looked upon skeptically or in a concerning way by the sector really does surprise me. I do see students as customers. I don't think that that's a bad thing.
No, nor
Um,
do I.
but I'm
Absolutely not.
also someone that thinks that complaints are a really good thing. So maybe
Yeah.
I'm not quite the norm in the sector, but hopefully I can persuade people.
Oh no, I've long held the belief that complaints are often your best source, A, of improvement, but B, also an ability to make lifelong customers, because
Mm,
you get to interact with them on a much more personal basis than your average customer. So I
yeah.
totally agree with you on that one. Okay, back to script then. Trauma-informed practice is really important to you guys. And you've been very vocal about using trauma-informed lens in all that you do. Can you
Mm.
share any moments where the approach fundamentally changed the outcome of a dispute compared to a traditional bureaucratic process?
Yes, I have been strong on encouraging trauma-informed practice within the sector. And that's because students are really strong on that. And, all of the inquiries across the sector are strong on that too. Um, I think that what's important to note about trauma-informed services is that at its heart, it is about adopting a more human approach to whatever
Yeah,
you're doing. For me, the focus is on complaints handling because that's a really important focus as an area of improvement for the sector and what the NSO does. But
yeah,
really, that more human approach to all interactions is a trauma-informed approach. Um, Prioritizing that human connection and deprioritizing the process element, I think, is important. Um, so a moment for me, I thought about this. There's so many moments, but
yeah.
the
I'm
one that
sure.
really stood out, and this actually isn't an example from the sector or NSO, but it's one that is very personal to me because for exactly the question that you've asked. For a time, I was a judge's associate in the family court,
Oh, okay.
and I heard lots of complaints, lots of family law disputes. So,
Yes.
seeing people day in, day out in the context of a legal system. So, trying to shoehorn deeply personal issues
Feelings.
into
Yeah.
this legal construct. I could never get my head around that. It was just such a strange thing. And I was in that time really lucky to work for a really great judge. She had this amazing ability in court to be able to, and I should say in family law, there's a lot of self-represented litigants. So,
Yes.
not represented by barristers. She was always able to de-escalate any situation or make people feel at ease in a courtroom environment, which is so foreign for most people.
Yeah.
She would really try hard to make sure people felt heard and understood. She would make sure that she spoke respectfully and consistently the same to everybody. Um, she would always use humor whenever she could. She always gave reasons for her decisions. Often
Yeah.
she would do that in court. So people would come back and she would sit there and talk through the judgment rather than just giving a 50-page document.
Yeah.
And she was just open and accessible for everybody. And that watching the impact that that had on people in this really foreign environment, talking about these deeply personal
Yeah.
issues to them and this fear about where children were going to live was something that has stayed with me forever. And
Mm.
never forgotten the lessons from Judge Hughes. So that's what it means to me.
That's a fabulous tale. I hope somehow she ends up hearing about this because it's fabulous that I had such a profound effect on you. And there's a famous judge in the States. I think he's in Chicago, who he's passed now, but he was very famous for being that very humanistic approach and would just throw
Yeah.
cases out if he felt sorry for the person. So
Yes.
it was that's lovely to hear. Yeah, and such important issues as well for people to be dealing with in such a high stress environment.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and it
that's
shows
great.
that you can do it. I mean, if Kate Hughes could do that in a family law environment, then we can do that in the higher
That's
education
right.
sector.
Absolutely, absolutely. Because this is not about life or death. This is
Mm,
this is education. And whilst it's important, undoubtedly, it's not so tough that, because having been one of our members and worked with our advocacy team, we've lost people.
yeah,
That's how serious it is for some of these young students. So
yeah,
I think that you're so right. The trauma informed approach is really important.
yeah,
Okay, moving on to the more kind of holistic overview, the smoke signals.
yeah.
You've had lots of individual cases and you've talked about some of the stats, but what is it that you're seeing across the sector right now that universities should be paying more attention to as the kind of the big clusters, would you say?
Yes, the smoke signals. Well, I preface this, and this is part of my key messaging forever, that yes, we have smoke signals through the NSO's complaints data, but every higher education provider has their own smoke signals, and they don't
Yeah,
have to wait. They don't have to wait to be told by the NSO before they take action to continually improve their services. Um, but in terms of what we're seeing, the first one that comes to mind would not be a surprise to anyone. Better practice in complaints handling. I don't think the sector could be nudged more towards improving their complaints handling
yeah,
teams. It's been the subject of so many external reports. I think every single one, including the most recent one from the Australian Human Rights Commission, the Respect at Uni survey, highlights
yeah,
that point. Um, we at the NSO have just released our first systemic report, which was on the use of confidentiality clauses in complaints handling. So we're also saying the same thing.
yeah.
So yeah, just real strong, lots of smoke on improving complaints handling processes. Um, Another one which is really fundamental and basic, but again, we see it all the time. And we see this through the most common remedy to an NSO outcome, which is better explanation of the decision made by the uni. Um, and that feeds into the smoke signal around how providers communicate with students.
Yeah.
Sounds really basic, but
It's really
it's
important.
it's so important to communicate in ways that you know are going to be read and understood. So
That's right.
communicate at the right time in the right way.
Especially
Um,
when, to your point about the diversity of the student body.
yes, yeah. So that's one, and I mean that's something to work on forever. No one is
Yeah,
perfect at that, and that's a really important one to collaborate with students on because I've been told that I don't communicate the best to students at times as well. I use government jargon and all sorts of things, too many
yeah.
acronyms. So yeah, just got to keep engaging with students to make sure
Oh, our
you
sector's,
communicate in the right
if it's
way.
not good at anything, it's good at acronyms.
Yes. Yep. Yes,
Definitely.
Sen, that's right. Um,
Exactly. Exactly.
Another one that, well, actually two more. From a data perspective, the most common complaint that we receive is about academic exclusion processes. So that comes in at 9% of all of our complaints. And these are
That's
the
big.
heartbreaking stories around students often who for who something traumatic has happened
Hmm.
that has caused their academic performance to drop, find themselves in academic exclusion processes for the university, which they find very difficult to navigate and confronting.
Yes.
So my key message to the sector on that, and I have talked about this many times over the last 12 months, is that it's okay to have those processes. Of course, at a uni, you have to have those
Yeah.
processes, but they need to be more student-centered.
Yes.
You can't have an exclusion process where someone who suffered trauma, who has multiple disabilities, is excluded from the university without any support around that decision.
Yeah.
It just needs to be designed better with the student in
It
mind.
almost needs flipping, doesn't it? The exclusion process needs to be the aim of which to keep the student.
Yes, yeah, the exclusion process is a fail. It's a system fail.
That's right. But
Um,
it's a fail on both sides, because
yeah,
they've got a part to play in that. So,
yeah. So
yeah,
that's a big one.
definitely.
And my final one would be um, really strong smoke signals around learning adjustment plans for students with a disability.
Yeah, which is
Lots.
which is a big cohort now.
Yeah, I mean, not as big as it should be. There's a
Yeah,
really big difference between students within the secondary school system who have a disability and
yeah.
students with a disability into higher education.
Okay.
Your listeners will tell me if I get this wrong, no doubt, but I think, and people in general terms, I think it sits at around 20, early 20s, 22% or something in the school
In
system.
secondary. Yeah, okay.
And then in higher ed, it drops to about 13%.
Right. Okay. So there's definitely some attrition there.
Yeah, yeah. So it could be a lot higher if we want to be, fully inclusive. Um, but we won't get there if we don't make the process around learning adjustment plans easier to create and then easier to implement
Yeah.
through different subjects. So that's a
I,
big smoke
I
signal.
wonder how many of them are there but don't know about it. Because one of the things that we found when I was over at QUT was there were people that didn't actually know that there could be adjustments made to suit their
Yeah,
disability.
yeah. I'm sure
So there's
that's
probably some in there
yes.
as well. And
Yeah,
I
but
know a lot of members are doing good work on trying to promote that, but that comes back
yeah,
to communication again.
50% of the complaints about learning adjustment plans are around them not being adhered to, though.
Right.
So
Yeah,
yeah,
that's
so
tough.
big area to
Like,
focus on.
yeah, great stuff. All right, thank you for that. Um, I'm going to want to talk about feedback loops. So there's two sides to this. Firstly, um, are you seeing many of the organizations responding positively, um, both to their internal advocacy efforts and from the NSO with regards to this is good feedback for us, this it helps us improve, or is this seen as another problem they have to deal with?
Well, I think overall, the sector has been fantastic for the NSO coming
That's
in
great.
to the sector. So cannot thank the sector enough for their patience and willingness to work with us over the first 12 months.
Brilliant.
Um, but I think we do see in practice through complaints both. So in a
Yeah,
way, that's great. It's great that there are providers that have already understood the key goal of the NSO's work with the sector, which is to have that open, accountable, continually improvement attitude. So, you
yeah,
take one complaint and you understand that what's happened could actually apply to many. So you fix the process or the system. But, we do also see other providers who um, handle their relationship with the NSO in the same way they do litigation. So it's more of a legal attitude
yeah,
to the NSO. It's more of a risk management
yeah.
process. Um, and it's much harder to get to where we want to be, which is that open and accountable
That's right.
improvement
Because
culture.
that's a defensive process as opposed to a positive one.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. So, yeah, room for improvement, but I think overall a pretty good start by the sector.
yeah, that's good. That's good. I've always believed that the advocacy services on campus can provide some of the very best feedback, not just on small
Yeah,
issues, but systemic issues, course-wide
yeah,
issues. So
yeah,
yeah, that's really encouraging to hear, Sarah. Okay, the silent student. Um, we know that for every student who complains, there's many, many others that are silent. What have you learned about the barriers that are still stopping students from coming forward, especially in sensitive areas like, gender-based violence or racism, two very hot topics now in our sector?
yeah. There are a lot of barriers in the higher education sector for students in general to complain. I mean, even outside the sector, nobody likes complaining. I mean, nobody
Yeah,
likes to do it. It takes time and it feels negative. You feel like you're a problem. Um, but you do it because there's a problem you need fixed. But in the higher education sector, the power imbalance between a student and the provider is really significant. A very common thing we hear from all students, regardless of the subject matter, is that fear of reprisal. The fear
yeah.
that there's going to be negative consequences from complaining. And we have seen negative consequences
Oh,
from
I'm sure.
students
I'm
complaining.
I'm sure you
So
have.
it's
Yeah,
a legitimate fear. Um, so Yeah, I mean that's been a hard realization over the last 12 months that the barriers are significant for victim survivors of gender-based violence and for students who are complaining about things like racism or race discrimination. The barriers are even more significant
Yeah.
because you're complaining to someone you don't know. Um, you may have complained already about these deeply personal issues.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
that takes so much courage and so much strength. Um, and so, I understand that that is a lot to ask of someone. So I try really hard in my engagement not to make people feel bad for not coming forward and complaining because I recognize that it can be a really big thing to do. Um, so what I think about in this space is, well, how can the NSO make it less of a burden?
Yeah.
And we can do that by reminding everyone that we accept anonymous complaints,
Yep.
and we can take action on anonymous complaints. If we get enough about a certain faculty or a certain issue in the sector, then we can affect the same systemic change even
Yeah.
without the names of a student. Um, we do things like the systemic report that we just published. That report was about advising the sector to really make clear the limits of confidentiality in complaints handling.
Yes.
And by taking that action, then providers will hopefully foster more trust in the process and will help students come forward and use the service. Um, so the barriers are significant. There's some things we can do, but equally, sometimes the barriers are insurmountable. And then if that is the case, the onus is on us as a system to take the load off complainants and do what we can systemically.
Yeah. Okay. Great. Thanks for that. So, moving on from that, what about you and your team? There's an emotional toll to all this. You head up an office that deals with the pointy end of student dissatisfaction, and it's heavy work. It's like being an electrician. Nobody calls an electrician until something's gone wrong, and then you want it back yesterday. How do you and your team maintain your own well-being whilst carrying the weight of these stories?
Mm. Um, well, I think that, I mean, it's as a starting point, it is an absolute, I think, it's a real privilege
Mm,
to hear these stories. I'm someone who is deeply motivated by helping people, problem solving and helping people. So
yeah.
I get a lot of satisfaction, and I really feel privileged to be entrusted with the stories and to be able to affect systems change. But you're right, many of them are heartbreaking and heavy.
Mm,
And for my staff that are carrying caseloads, it takes a lot of energy to
yeah.
absorb other people's energy. Um, and that's the same for complaints handlers and advocates in the sector too. I really realise that.
Absolutely. Our teams do
So
great work.
yes. So we have a few things that we do. The first thing we do is we've tried hard to establish a culture where we recognise that it can be heavy work,
Yeah.
which again
Really
sounds
important.
simple, but it's really important.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
Hugely.
I've seen how far the complaints handling profession has come in the last 20 years. When I started, it was very much the just toughen up and you wouldn't
That's
talk
right.
about
That's
it
right. Yeah.
type
Man up.
thing.
Yeah.
Um, so that culture of recognizing that it can be heavy and that's okay. And if that happens, you can debrief with anybody. We have a
Mm,
really one team culture at the NSO. So
that's
you can
good.
talk to anybody. We talk about it often. Um, Peer support. We also have a telehealth counselling service that everybody has
Yeah.
access to.
That's
That's
good.
really encouraged, and that's a really good service. And I know that many in the sector have the same. And if there
Yeah.
isn't, then they should, because it can be used. You can use it proactively to
Yes.
talk to someone who's qualified about a sort of a support plan for you,
Yeah.
which I've done pretty much in every place I've worked because, everybody has to have a plan that works for them.
That's
So we
right. It's
have
an
that
outlet
too.
valve, isn't it, to download?
Yeah, yeah. And we celebrate wins as a team. So,
Oh,
we
great.
have a NSO Teams chat where people will put, a great outcome story and we'll all celebrate that together.
Fantastic. That's great. So talking about success stories, um, you could look at spreadsheets all day, but what does a win look like for you personally? Is it policy change? Is it something more individual? Is it both?
It's both, totally 100% both for me. Yeah, as I said before, I, yeah, my passion is helping everybody to reach their full potential. That's the most important thing to me
Yeah,
because I think if we all did that, then we as a society benefit from the full potential of everybody. And so in this role, for me, that's about helping people resolve their individual problems and overcoming conflict. One
yeah,
way or the other, overcoming, moving beyond the conflict, and hopefully repairing relationships. Um, so whenever we get a win, whenever we have a relationship repaired between a provider and a student, or whenever a student gets an outcome, that's a massive win. And we do celebrate that. And
yeah.
um,
Rightly so.
because you have asked me this question, I'm going to confess to
Oh, I like
keeping.
this.
So I keep quotes. I keep quotes
Oh,
of
that's
what
nice.
students have said, and I knew you were going to ask me this, so I pulled the quotes up. For a
Oh,
time, I kept these in my pocket. In year
did
one,
you?
I had.
That's really wholesome.
I know,
I
I
love
know,
that.
but can I read you one?
Oh, please do.
Okay.
Please share. I love this.
Okay, so this one is really, really lovely. This student said, This is a life-changing news for me and my family. The updated result on my transcript would provide me with great advantage while I apply for my future job, and the amount of tuition refund would make a significant change to my family. I don't know how to express my gratitude towards everything that has just happened, which I love.
So good, isn't it?
Can I read one more?
Oh, no, please do. I could do
Okay.
this all afternoon.
I know, I know. I promise this is the last one, but I mean, this is, yeah, I mean, how can they not be wins that really
Oh,
inspire you?
100%. 100%.
Okay, last one. I could not express how thankful and grateful I am for the outcome. The school approved my application. It is the best news I have ever heard in my life. I burst into tears when I saw the email on my phone. I could not believe this is actually happening. I am so, so thankful for your help and all relevant people engaged in this process regarding my claim. Thank you so much.
Brilliant.
I know
Isn't
they
it?
are.
And listen, that's hopefully the listeners are getting as well. I'm getting oxytocin rushed just listening to it.
I
That's the kind
know.
of that gratitude is worth its weight in gold.
I know. I mean, how can you not be inspired by a role that radically changes,
A hundred
someone's
percent, a
life?
hundred percent.
It,
And going back to what I said before, there'll be down days. There'll be days where people leave, or worse, people make really bad decisions for the rest of their life based on these outcomes. And you need these highlights to as touchstones to go
yeah,
back to remind you that there's a lot of light as well as the darkness. So
yeah, yeah.
really
And the power
fabulous.
of complaints handling. But yes, it is both. And affecting systems level change is very important for me.
Yeah,
Systems level changes for the better, improvements. Yeah, I love doing that. I love working in a sector that's so big and complex, like higher education, and
yeah,
just helping it, turn that ship just a little bit.
yeah. That's great. Which perfectly segues into my next question. So if we sit down in 12 months again, and I have to say this has been really wholesome, so I'm probably going to invite you back in 12 months. Um, what would be the one systemic needle that you hope to have moved in the sector in 12 months' time? What would be
Uh,
your big goal?
well, I mean, the key reason for existence for the NSO is to improve the quality and the safety of the student experience,
Yeah,
all students. I guess, and we do that through complaints handling. Um, so for me, it's clear that there are a couple of needles within under that umbrella that are important to the sector, that the sector has agreed to. And so my focus over the next 12 months is doing my part in the NSO to affect that needle change. So improving the prevention and response to gender-based violence.
Gender-based violence, yeah,
That's
absolutely.
so important. Gender-based violence, for us in particular, response improvement, very important.
Yeah.
And
especially with some of the news that's been coming out about it and this week at UTS and so on, really tough.
Yeah, there's lots of work to do. And the sector is willing to do it. So I think there's a real momentum. The same for students who experience complaints about racism and race discrimination. Lots of little needles that could be shifted for the better in that space, particularly around better complaints handling, better outcomes that genuinely get to eliminating the foundational challenges, the things that cause the race discrimination in the first place. And, you know, the two that I mentioned before, I know you said one, Paul, but
the two, absolutely, go.
The two that I mentioned before, more student-centered academic exclusion processes, that's very important to me because it's very important to students. And more user-friendly and reliable processes around learning adjustment plans is also very important to me.
Okay, some big tasks ahead. Big tasks ahead. Before I move on to my last question that you do know about, I just want to segue briefly and ask you, what do you see as your relationship being with the new commission that's now been officially stood up?
You mean, so not the gender-based violence
regulator,
ATEC?
Yeah, ATEC.
To use another acronym.
Yeah, that's right. We love it.
Australian Tertiary Education Commission.
Yeah.
So the way that I conceive of it, and we do meet with ATEC, and we meet with everyone in what I call the oversight system. You know, we're not a regulator, but we play a part, as does ATEC. So I conceive of that relationship as ATEC being it's not hierarchical people, but they are on top. You know, they are looking. They call themselves the stewards of the system, and I think that's right. You know, they look at the big levers to make sure that they are right for student experience and for other things. And we are right at the grassroots. You know, where they're hearing from. Coalface, whichever one. I wish there was a nice one. Coalface is,
That's right. Well, hopefully that's mostly being shut down now. Yeah.
Yep. So we're listening to students. We're hearing how those big policy levers are manifesting for students. And so our responsibility is to connect that up for ATEC, to give them the information they need to fit within their decision-making processes about what those big levers should look like.
Yeah, great. Okay. All right, final one for you then, before we wrap up. We have talked historically, myself and you, because I think most of the guys in our sector that I deal with know that I think that the student-led organisations is where advocacy should sit. But the reality is, it's some it's in the student-led organisation, some it's wholly owned subsidiaries, some it still sits with the university. But what feedback would you give them about how they are supporting students that would maybe help things get resolved earlier so that less things come across your desk?
Yes. So I think that your listeners do amazing work, and that's my number one message. Absolutely amazing work. I mean, like we were talking about before, that the requirement of the sector to ensure that students connect with others and they have an experience that helps them feel like they belong, connecting with other peers and with the provider is everything. It's actually everything. And your listeners do all that hard work, which is amazing. My advice would be, and this is not necessarily so that things don't come to the NSO, because Second key message would be that's absolutely okay when things come to us, because that's why we
That's what
exist.
you're
And
there
it's,
for. That's right.
yeah, it's the student's right to escalate a complaint, and that's absolutely okay. Um, but it's also in the best interests of everybody if things can be resolved early and quickly at the,
That's right. Less
the
trauma.
most cold-faced point.
Yeah.
Um, so my advice would be, along the lines of being trauma informed and prioritizing the human connection rather than the process. It would be to take the time to listen,
Yeah.
to meaningfully listen. So don't do things on the fly. Just really carve out the time to listen to what a student is saying, and understand the full context of what the student is saying to you. Acknowledge concerns and issues. Set out, if it is a process, if you're helping to resolve something, set out what the process will be that you're going to follow. And if you give a time frame, you should meet that
Yes.
time frame,
Try and meet
or
those timeframes. Yeah.
connect in with the student if you can't meet the time frame, to explain that. Um, and my most important piece of advice would be, if you find that in any situation a policy or the system is resulting in a manifestly unfair outcome for the student, then put your hand up and say something, escalated.
Yeah.
Don't ever feel like you don't have the power to say something in that situation, because that's the most important thing. In those moments where you think something is deeply unfair for an individual, then
Yeah.
that's how to get to that systems change.
Brilliant. So you'd encourage advocates to approach you as well if they felt like there were students not being heard.
Yeah, the proper response. Yes, I'm always approachable. The team is always approachable. But to get a gold star from your provider, a really good thing to do is to let them know that there's a internal complaints team within the
Yes.
providers. Because another thing that I've noticed about the sector is many students don't know that their providers
Oh,
have a central
huge
complaints team
problem.
that they can go
Huge
to.
problem. Yeah.
And we deal with these complaints teams often, and the staff are fantastic.
Yeah.
They're experienced complaints handlers. They know their provider. They work with all the different faculties, so they're a good place. Your listeners should definitely refer people to that team. But also, if it's urgent and a student has made attempts to try and resolve it first, then yes, don't be afraid to escalate to the
Yeah.
NSO.
Yeah. Absolutely. Brilliant. Well, listen, I can't tell you how much I've enjoyed today. It's been so
Me
wholesome
too.
and really gratifying. When things like the NSO start up, one of your fears, because of the way that the sector sometimes is that here we've got another organization with some powers over, supporting the universities and the students, and we're going to end up with more bureaucracy. It's so
Mm.
gratifying to see someone with such a fantastic moral compass who is so human-centered at the top running this place. So I can't thank you enough. And
It's a
it's been an
pleasure.
absolute pleasure. Thank you so much.
I have loved it too. And yes, invite me back.
Oh, I will. I will. Don't worry about that. Okay. That's all for today. Thank you guys for listening. Look out for the next podcast, which will be coming in 2 weeks' time.